Daniel Mercer was not important. He knew that better than anyone. He was not a soldier, not a leader, not even a scientist with big awards. He was just a repair technician sent to fix broken systems in places no one else wanted to go. And when the transport ship dropped him above the planet Zaranine, he believed this mission would be the same as all the others: quiet, simple, forgettable. The planet looked strange from orbit. Its oceans were silver instead of blue, and thin storms of purple light moved slowly across its surface. But Daniel had seen strange skies before. Alien worlds always looked dramatic from space. That did not mean they were dangerous. He told himself this was just another job. The message he received had been short, almost cold. Human technician required urgent repair of Royal Core device. No details, no explanation, only coordinates and payment confirmation. The money was good, very good, enough to clear his debts on Earth. So he said yes without asking questions. When his shuttle entered the atmosphere, the sky turned deep violet. Lightning flashed silently across distant clouds. And for a moment, he felt something strange in his chest. Not fear, not exactly, more like pressure, as if the planet was aware that he was arriving. He shook the feeling away and focused on landing. The palace where he was directed to land did not look like metal or stone. It looked alive, tall towers curved like bones rising from the ground. The walls shimmered softly, almost breathing. Daniel swallowed and stepped out with his tool case in hand, trying to ignore the way the alien guards stared at him. They were tall, taller than any human, with silver skin and dark eyes that did not blink often. They carried weapons that looked grown rather than built, and none of them spoke to him. They simply watched as if he were an animal being delivered for study. Daniel cleared his throat and tried to smile, but no one smiled back. Inside the palace, the air felt warm and heavy. The floor under his boots was smooth but slightly soft like hardened skin. He told himself again that this was fine. He had repaired machines in zero gravity. He had fixed reactors leaking radiation. He could handle strange architecture. He was just here to fix a device. Nothing more. They led him to a massive chamber at the center of the structure. And that was when he saw it. The device was not made of wires or circuits. It was a large organic structure suspended in the air, glowing faintly blue. Thick veins of light pulsed through it like blood through a heart, and every few seconds it released a deep vibration that Daniel felt in his bones. He stopped walking. This was not mechanical failure. This was something else entirely. He looked back at the guards, but they gave him no explanation. One of them finally spoke in a low voice. "Repair the core." That was all. Daniel walked closer, opening his case slowly, scanning the surface with his handheld device. The readings made no sense. Energy patterns shifted constantly, adapting to his scanner, as if reacting to it. He frowned, confused. He had never seen technology behave like this. It was not broken. It was unstable, almost emotional. He hesitated, then placed his hand gently on its surface, just to feel its temperature. And the moment his skin touched it, the entire chamber shook violently. The blue glow turned bright white. Alarms echoed through the palace, and the guard stepped back in shock. Daniel tried to pull his hand away, but for a second he could not move. A wave of energy rushed through him, not painful, but overwhelming. Images flashed in his mind, stars collapsing, worlds burning, something ancient watching from the dark between galaxies. He gasped and fell to one knee as the light around him grew stronger. When the shaking stopped, silence filled the chamber. The core was no longer glowing blue. It pulsed in rhythm with Daniel's heartbeat, soft and steady. The guard were whispering now, their voices tense, uncertain. And then she entered. The alien queen did not rush. She walked slowly into the chamber. Her presence alone seemed to command the air itself. Her skin shimmered with faint patterns of light, and her eyes were darker than the guards, deeper, older. She looked at the core first, then at Daniel. He expected anger or fear, but her expression was calm, almost thoughtful. She stepped closer to him and spoke in perfect human English, her voice smooth and controlled. "You were not sent here to fix it," she said quietly. Daniel forced himself to stand, his heart still racing. "Then why am I here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The queen's gaze did not leave his face. "Because it chose you," she replied. A murmur spread across the chamber. The The guards shifted uncomfortably, as if something impossible had just happened. Daniel looked back at the core, which now pulsed in sync with him, every beat matching his own heart exactly. He was not important. He was just a technician, just a man trying to earn money and go home. He did not ask to be chosen. He did not even understand what that meant. The Queen took another step closer, close enough that he could see faint lines of light moving beneath her skin. "The core has never reacted to our kind," she said softly. "Not in 1,000 cycles." Daniel felt the weight of every alien eye in the room, watching him, judging him, afraid of him. He came to fix a device, but the device had just awakened, and it was no longer broken. If you want to know what happens next and how an ordinary human becomes part of an alien empire, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next part of this story. The chamber did not return to normal after the core bonded with Daniel. The air itself felt charged, as if the planet was holding its breath. The guards no longer looked at him like a simple human worker. Now they looked at him with something far more dangerous: uncertainty. Daniel stood in the center of the glowing chamber, trying to understand what had just happened. The core still pulsed gently behind him, its rhythm steady and alive, matching his heartbeat as if they had always belonged together. He wiped sweat from his forehead and forced himself to look at the Queen again. She had not stepped back. She had not shown fear. She stood tall and still, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. This was a ruler who had never lowered her gaze to anyone. Her presence was quiet but absolute. Even the guards kept their eyes lowered in respect. "You will release him," one of the council elders said from the edge of the chamber, his voice sharp and shaking with anger. "The core has malfunctioned before. This is contamination." The Queen did not look at the elder. Her eyes remained on Daniel, studying him carefully, measuring his breathing, his posture, his confusion. She finally spoke in a calm tone that carried through the entire hall. "The core does not malfunction." The elder stepped forward, his silver skin trembling with frustration. "It bonds only with royalty. It answers only to our bloodline." The Queen slowly turned her head toward him, and in that simple movement the entire room went silent. "And yet," she said softly, "it answers to him." Daniel felt trapped between forces he did not understand. He raised his hand slightly, trying to calm the situation. "Look, I did not mean to touch anything important. If this is some kind of mistake, I can step away." He tried to move backward, but the moment he did, the core's glow flickered sharply, and a low vibration filled the chamber. The walls trembled again, warning them all. Daniel froze in place, realizing that distance was not allowed. The Queen observed this carefully, then approached him until she stood only a few steps away, close enough that the light from the core reflected in her dark eyes. "It responds to your intention," she said quietly. "You do not control it by force." Daniel frowned, confused. "I am not controlling anything." "Exactly," she replied. The council members began whispering rapidly in their own language, their voices rising in panic. Some demanded isolation, others demanded execution. One even suggested cutting the human away from the core permanently. But the Queen raised her hand, and every voice died instantly. Daniel noticed something important then. The Queen had absolute power here. No one challenged her openly. No one dared step closer without permission. She ruled through authority that had never been questioned. She had never knelt, never compromised, never asked for help. Until now. She turned her attention back to Daniel, her voice lower this time, meant only for him. "You are afraid." He gave a small, nervous laugh. "Of course I am afraid. I came here to fix a machine. Now everyone is looking at me like I started a war." Her expression shifted slightly, not a smile, but something close to curiosity. "Most beings tremble in my presence," she said. "You do not." Daniel blinked, surprised. "That is because I do not fully understand what is happening." A faint ripple of light moved across her skin, almost like a reaction to his honesty. "You stand before the ruler of this world," she said, "and yet your heart does not bow." Daniel hesitated before answering, but then he spoke plainly. "On Earth, respect is earned, not automatic." A sharp intake of breath spread among the guards. Such words would have been seen as insult from anyone else. But the Queen did not react with anger. Instead, she studied him more deeply, as if she had just discovered a rare phenomenon. The core pulsed brighter again, and this time an image projected above it, a field of stars shifting into patterns, unknown symbols forming and dissolving. Daniel instinctively stepped closer to examine it. Forgetting where he was, forgetting who stood before him, he began analyzing the structure like a technician would. "This is not random," he murmured. "It is mapping something." The queen watched as he moved without fear, without hesitation, interacting with the most sacred object in their civilization as if it were simply a puzzle to solve. Something inside her changed in that moment, something she had not felt in many cycles. Hope. The elders saw it too, and that frightened them more than the human did. "He must be removed." One of them insisted again. "If the core bonds to an outsider, our bloodline loses its right to rule." The queen's eyes hardened slightly, her voice becoming colder, stronger. "The core chooses strength of mind, not strength of blood." She stepped forward and did something that shocked every being in the chamber. She lowered her head slightly toward Daniel, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, a gesture she had never offered to anyone outside her lineage. "You will remain," she declared, her voice echoing through the hall. "Under my protection." The chamber erupted in quiet chaos. Whispers of rebellion, fear, disbelief, but none dared openly oppose her decision. Daniel swallowed, realizing this was far bigger than a repair job. "Protected from what?" he asked carefully. The queen's gaze shifted to the ceiling as distant rumbling echoed through the palace structure. Alarms began to activate in deeper sections of the complex. Red light replaced the soft blue glow. "From what the core has just awakened," she answered. High above the planet, something ancient and patient changed its course in the dark of space. And for the first time in thousands of cycles, the Queen of Zyra, 9, felt uncertainty, because she had never knelt. But now her world depended on a human who did not kneel either. The alarms did not stop. They grew louder, deeper, vibrating through the living walls of the palace like a warning from the planet itself. Daniel stood near the core, watching its light shift from blue to a slow-burning white. And for the first time since he arrived, he understood something simple and terrifying. This was never a broken machine. It was a lock. The queen ordered the chamber sealed, thick organic barriers sliding into place over the entrances. The council members were escorted out despite their protests, and only a small group of elite guards remained, their weapons ready but their eyes unsure. The core continued to pulse in rhythm with Daniel's heartbeat, as if waiting for him to understand it. "You said it awakened something," Daniel said carefully, trying to control the shaking in his voice. "What exactly did I wake up?" The queen did not answer immediately. Instead, she walked slowly around the core, her fingers hovering near its surface but never touching it, as if she respected its boundaries. When she finally spoke, her tone was different now, less commanding, more honest. "Our history speaks of an ancient war," she said. "Before my bloodline ruled, before our cities grew into the sky, there was another power in this system." The core responded to her words, projecting shifting images into the air above it. Daniel watched as stars formed patterns, fleets of dark shapes moving between planets, worlds burning in silent explosions. He felt a chill spread through him as the images sharpened. "They were called the architects," the queen continued. "They created this device, not as a weapon, but as a guardian." Daniel stepped closer, studying the projections. "Guardian of what?" "Of evolution," she replied. The images changed again, showing different species standing before the core over countless centuries. Some were tall and armored, others small and fragile. Each reached out to touch it, and each time the core remained silent, unresponsive. "It tests civilizations," she explained. "It bonds only with those who possess adaptability beyond instinct, those who survive not by strength alone, but by change." Daniel frowned. "Then why did it bond with me, and not your people?" For the first time, something like pain flickered across her expression. "Because we stopped changing," she said quietly. "We became powerful, stable, predictable." The core pulsed brighter, as if confirming her words. Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest again. Not energy this time, but understanding. Humans had never been the strongest species, They survived because they adapted. They failed, learned, rebuilt, and tried again. So if the device is not broken, he said slowly, it was waiting. Yes, the Queen answered, waiting for a species that still evolves under pressure. Before Daniel could respond, a sharp tone cut through the chamber. One of the guards stepped forward, his voice tense. Your Majesty, long-range sensors confirm an object has entered the outer system. Trajectory matches ancient war records. Daniel looked up at the projection above the core, and there was a massive structure drifting between stars, dark and angular, moving without visible engines. It did not look damaged or old. It looked patient. They detected the activation. The Queen said, her voice steady but lower now. The core does not only guard, it signals. Signals what? Daniel asked, though he feared he already knew. It signals that a species has passed the test, she replied. The room felt smaller suddenly, heavier. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, and the architects come back to see if we deserve to keep it. The Queen turned her gaze to him, impressed by how quickly he understood. Or to reclaim it, she said. The core shifted again, and new data streams appeared in the air, this time not images of the past, but calculations, defense grids, planetary shields, fleet positions. Daniel recognized patterns instantly. The device was feeding him strategic information, not randomly, but directly to him. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the data settle in his thoughts. He was not a soldier, but he understood systems, and this was a system under threat. They are not attacking yet, he said slowly. They're observing. Yes, the Queen confirmed. They wait to measure response. The deeper truth settled between them then. This was not simply about war. It was about judgment. The architects did not conquer blindly. They evaluated, and if a civilization failed, they erased it. Daniel looked at the Queen, seeing not just a ruler now, but someone carrying the weight of an entire world. You knew this could happen, he said softly. We hoped it would not, she admitted. The core had been dormant for centuries. We believed the architects were gone. The core pulsed again, stronger this time, and a thin line of light extended from it toward Daniel's chest. Not touching, but close enough that he felt its heat. It is linking deeper, one of the guards warned. Daniel did not step away. He felt fear, yes, but also clarity. The core was not trying to control him. It was amplifying him, unlocking pathways in his mind, showing him possibilities a species had always possessed but rarely used together. If I stay connected, he said quietly, I can access its full systems. The Queen studied him carefully, understanding the risk in his words. Full synchronization will change you, she said. You may not remain entirely human. Daniel gave a small, nervous smile. Humans change all the time. Outside the sealed chamber, the planet's defense fleets began mobilizing. The sky above Zyra. 9 darkened as distant ships aligned for possible battle, and far beyond the outer orbit, the massive shape of the architect vessel adjusted its path slightly. Daniel opened his eyes again, determination replacing confusion. He had come here to fix something, and in a strange way, that was still true. The difference was that now he understood what was broken. It was not the core. It was the balance between survival and stagnation. And the architects were coming to test whether humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, would be enough to protect 2 worlds instead of 1. The first impact did not come as fire or explosion. It came as silence. Every satellite above Zyra. 9 went dark at the same time, one by one, like stars being erased from the sky. Inside the palace, the lights flickered and stabilized, but the tension in the air sharpened instantly. Daniel felt it through the core before anyone spoke, a ripple of disturbance spreading through the system like a warning pulse. They have begun, the Queen said quietly, her voice calm but edged with steel. On the projection above the core, the massive architect vessel moved closer into clear view, its surface shifting in impossible geometric patterns, as if it were not built from matter, but from controlled space itself. Smaller shapes detached from it. Not fighters, not bombs, but signal nodes, drifting in a high orbit and locking in a formation around the planet. Daniel studied the pattern quickly, his mind racing. They're not attacking physically, he said. They're isolating communication. Yes, one of the royal tacticians confirmed. Planetary networks are disrupted, external transmissions blocked. The war signal was not noise. It was a message written in control, a demonstration that the architects could take the sky without firing a single weapon. Panic began spreading across the lower cities. Reports flooded in of system failures, navigation errors, defense grids freezing in place. The council chamber doors burst open as several elders rushed in despite protocol, their faces tight with anger and fear. "This is because of the human," one shouted, pointing directly at Daniel. The activation drew them here. Daniel did not deny it. He could feel the core responding more strongly now, its rhythm faster, its projections sharper. It was feeding him data at increasing speed, almost urging him to act. The Queen stepped between Daniel and the council, her presence commanding immediate silence. "Blame does not defend us," she said firmly. "Action does." Another tremor ran through the palace, this time not from within, but from the sky above. A low-frequency wave passed over the planet, disabling surface weapon platforms without damaging them. It was precise, surgical, terrifyingly controlled. "They are testing our systems," Daniel said, his voice more focused now, mapping weaknesses. The Queen turned to him. "What do they want?" Before he could answer, the core flared suddenly, and a direct transmission cut through the sealed chamber, bypassing all palace filters. A dark holographic figure formed above the core, tall, faceless, its shape constantly shifting as if reality struggled to define it. The voice that followed was not loud, but it carried absolute authority. "Civilization of Zyra 9, it said evenly. "You have reactivated the Guardian." The room froze. Guards raised weapons instinctively, but the Queen lifted her hand, stopping them. "You approach sovereign territory," she replied, her voice steady despite the pressure in the air. "State your purpose." The holographic figure tilted slightly, as if amused. "Purpose is evaluation," it answered. "The Guardian signals that evolution continues." Daniel stepped forward without thinking, feeling the core pulse in response to his movement. "And if we fail your evaluation," he asked. The shifting figure turned toward him slowly, its presence intensifying. "Then continuation will be denied." A cold silence followed those words, the meaning clear. Denial meant extinction, not conquest, not slavery removal. The council erupted in whispers again, fear spreading openly now. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others urged an attack despite the clear imbalance of power. Daniel forced himself to think, to ignore the rising panic. He noticed something in the hologram's transmission pattern, small fluctuations in frequency. "They are not emotional," he murmured to the Queen. "They're logical, testing response patterns." "Yes," she said softly, understanding his direction. The holographic figure spoke again. "The Guardian is bonded with a non-native species," it stated. "Identify the human." All eyes turned to Daniel instantly, the request hanging heavy in the chamber. The Queen's gaze sharpened, protective and calculating at the same time. "He stands under my authority," she declared. "Authority is irrelevant," the architect replied. "The human is the variable." Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He was no longer a technician caught in something strange. He was the center of an interstellar judgment. The core pulsed faster, feeding him defensive schematics, probability models, potential outcomes. "They want to see how I respond," he said quietly, mostly to himself. The Queen studied him carefully. "And how will you respond?" Daniel looked up at the dark holographic figure, forcing himself to meet its undefined gaze. "You say you evaluate evolution," he said clearly. "Then evaluate this. We do not bow because we are threatened." A ripple passed through the hologram, subtle but noticeable. "You display defiance," it observed. "I display adaptation," Daniel corrected. "If you wanted war, you would have attacked already. You are here to see if we deserve the Guardian, so test us properly." The council gasped at his boldness, but the Queen's expression changed slightly, something like approval flashing across her features. The architect vessel in orbit shifted formation again, the signal nodes repositioning, energy building along invisible lines in space. Very well, the holographic voice responded. Trial phase initiated. Suddenly the palace trembled violently, not from bombardment, but from inside the planet itself. Deep seismic waves rolled outward from the planet's core. Cities across Zyra 9 began reporting infrastructure collapse, energy networks destabilizing in control patterns. They're simulating planetary stress, Daniel realized, forcing systemic adaptation. The core surged with energy, linking deeper with him, offering options, rerouting pathways, suggesting countermeasures, but it required human decision, not automated response. The Queen moved closer to him, standing at his side instead of in front of him now, a silent sign of trust. "Can you guide it?" she asked. Daniel inhaled slowly, fear still present but no longer dominant. "I can try," he answered. Above them, the sky darkened further as the architect vessel's structure unfolded into something far larger than it first appeared. Not a ship, but a moving fortress, a judge hovering above an entire civilization. The war signal had been sent, and the trial had officially begun. The ground did not break all at once. It fractured in patterns precise and controlled. Entire districts across Zyra 9 reported synchronized failures as power grids shut down, transit systems froze mid-air, defensive towers locked into useless standby modes. It was not destruction, it was pressure, the kind that forced a system to either evolve or collapse. Inside the sealed chamber, Daniel felt every disruption through the core, streams of data flowing into his mind like cold water. Infrastructure maps, population density charts, stress points and planetary shields. The Guardian was not panicking. It was waiting for direction, waiting for choice. "They are compressing our reaction time," one of the tacticians said, voice tight with fear. "Every delay multiplies failure." Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, not because they were stronger than the threats, but because they learned under pressure, they improvised, they turned weakness into solution. "They expect centralized response," he said suddenly, opening his eyes again. "They are measuring leadership efficiency." The Queen stood beside him, her presence steady but no longer distant. "Our command structure is unified," she replied. "We act as one." "That is the problem," Daniel answered. "They're testing flexibility, not obedience." Another tremor shook the palace, and this time part of the outer wall cracked slightly. Guards stiffened but held position. The architect hologram reappeared above the core, silent and observant, recording everything. Guardian bond subject, the faceless voice stated, "Planetary resilience below optimal threshold." Daniel looked up at it sharply. "Because you are forcing it through a single channel," he said. "You want to see if we can break pattern?" The hologram did not respond verbally, but its shape shifted subtly, as if recalibrating focus. Daniel turned to the Queen quickly. "Give local authority to your cities," he urged. "Allow independent response, cut central override, let each sector adapt differently." The council members who had forced their way back into the chamber reacted immediately. "That will cause chaos," one argued. "Without unified command, we lose control." Daniel shook his head. "Humans survive because of controlled chaos," he said firmly. "When systems fail, individuals solve problems in their own way. Variation increases survival chances." The Queen studied him for only a second before making her decision. "Override central command," she ordered calmly. "Authorize autonomous adaptation in all major sectors." The tacticians hesitated only briefly before executing the command. Across the planet, city leaders regained independent system control. Engineers rerouted power in unpredictable patterns. Civilians were given real-time emergency tools instead of waiting for instructions. The rigid perfection of Zyra 9's infrastructure began shifting into something less efficient but more alive. The architect vessel in orbit responded instantly, adjusting the pressure points. Seismic waves intensified in some regions while decreasing in others, as if searching for collapse. But something unexpected happened instead. Energy grids began stabilizing in creative formations. Some cities used underground bioreactors never meant for full output. Others converted transport networks into temporary power relays. "They're compensating," one guard whispered in disbelief. Daniel felt the core pulse brighter. Syncing with the unpredictable responses below, it was no longer feeding him only data, it was amplifying human pattern recognition, highlighting emerging strengths in real time. The holographic architect leaned slightly forward, deviation detected. It stated, "Outcome variance increasing." Daniel stepped closer to the projection. "That is evolution," he said evenly, "not perfect order, but adaptive disorder." For a moment, the pressure waves stopped completely, an eerie stillness settling over the planet, as if the architects were recalculating their entire model. Then the true test began. From orbit, focused beams of gravitational distortion descended toward key population centers, not enough to destroy them, but enough to bend structures and destabilize foundations. The Queen felt it instantly through her planetary link, pain flickering across her normally composed expression. "They are targeting civilians now," she said quietly. "No," Daniel corrected after checking the core's projections. "They are targeting emotional stability." The Guardian began emitting a new signal, one Daniel had not seen before. Not defensive, not structural, but neural. It linked communication networks across the planet and projected calming frequencies, coordinated emergency guidance, shared problem-solving feeds. Instead of fear spreading, information spread faster. Citizens saw solutions in real time. Communities coordinated without waiting for command. Alien engineers who had once relied only on central authority began innovating locally, inspired by the rapid exchange of ideas flowing through the Guardian's expanded link. The architect hologram flickered slightly, an almost imperceptible disturbance in its otherwise stable projection. Collective adaptability exceeding projection. It observed. Daniel allowed himself a small breath of relief, but he knew the test was not over. "You said the Guardian once belonged to you," he said to the hologram. "Maybe you lost it because you stopped changing too." The chamber fell silent at his bold statement. Even the Queen glanced at him briefly, surprised by his tone. The hologram did not show anger, but its edges sharpened faintly. Assertion noted. It replied. Above the planet, the massive architect vessel unfolded further, revealing internal structures glowing with ancient energy. One final wave of pressure built along its surface, stronger than before, powerful enough to fracture continents if released fully. "This is the final metric," the tactician whispered, fear creeping back into his voice. Daniel felt the core surge deeply, offering him a dangerous option. Full synchronization, merging human intuition with Guardian capacity completely, amplifying not only data processing but emotional projection across the entire planet. "If I do this," he said quietly to the Queen, "I will connect to every mind below for a moment." She met his eyes without hesitation, trust clear in her gaze now. "Then show them who we are," she answered. Daniel placed both hands firmly on the core, allowing the synchronization to deepen. Lights surged around him, spreading outward in waves across Zyra. 9. Not as force, but as unity, millions of minds linked briefly, sharing fear, determination, creativity, hope, the chaotic strength of humanity blending with alien discipline. When the final gravitational wave descended, the planet did not shatter. It flexed. Infrastructure absorbed stress through distributed systems. Cities stabilized through shared innovation, and the energy beam dissipated against a shield no longer rigid, but adaptive. High above, the architect vessel paused its charge sequence. Trial phase complete, the hologram announced slowly. And for the first time since the war's signal began, silence returned not as threat, but as consideration. Silence did not feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like the moment after a storm when the air still carries electricity. The architect vessel remained in orbit, no longer attacking, no longer testing, simply watching. Inside the palace the tremors had stopped, but the political fault lines were just beginning to crack. Daniel slowly stepped back from the core, the light around him fading to a steady glow. His body felt weaker now, as if the synchronization had drained something deep inside him, but his mind was clearer than ever. The Guardian pulsed calmly behind him, stable, alive, accepted. The trial phase is complete. The architect hologram repeated, its voice still neutral. Evolutionary threshold met. The council members looked at one another in disbelief, relief mixing with fear, because passing the test did not erase the deeper problem. The Guardian had bonded with a human, not with their queen, not with their bloodline. The hologram turned slightly toward the queen. Governance structure anomaly detected. It stated, Guardian bond subject is not sovereign entity. The words hung in the chamber like a blade. The queen straightened, her posture regal and unshaken. Clarify, she commanded. The Guardian amplifies leadership, the architect explained. Sovereign must be bonded or aligned with bond subject to maintain planetary advancement trajectory. A quiet wave of understanding moved through the room. The architects were not simply testing survival. They were evaluating long-term evolution. And in their calculation, divided authority meant stagnation. One of the elders stepped forward quickly, sensing opportunity. Then the solution is simple, he said sharply. Remove the human and restore proper lineage control. Several council members nodded, courage returning now that the external threat had paused, their fear shifting back into tradition. Daniel felt the shift instantly. The core's pulse tightened slightly. Reacting to rising hostility, he did not move, he did not argue, he simply watched the queen. She stood completely still, her expression unreadable. But something deeper moved behind her eyes, something older than politics, older than tradition. She had ruled without question for many cycles. She had never shared power, never needed to. Until now. If the Guardian withdraws, she asked calmly, what will occur? Regression probability increases, the hologram replied. Architect intervention likelihood rises. In simple terms, if Daniel was removed, the planet might face judgment again, and next time, the outcome might not be survival. The chamber grew tense, guards subtly shifting their stance, unsure where loyalty should fall, with tradition or with survival. The elder spoke again, louder now. Your Majesty, we cannot allow an outsider to stand above our bloodline. Our authority is sacred. The queen finally turned her gaze toward him, and this time, there was no softness in her expression, only cold certainty. Authority that refuses evolution is not sacred, she said quietly. A ripple of shock spread through the chamber. Her words were not only political, they were personal. She stepped down from the raised platform where she had always stood during council sessions, descending to the same level as Daniel. The movement alone sent a wave of whispers through the room. She had never lowered herself physically before, never stood beside anyone as equal. Daniel felt the weight of her presence as she stopped next to him. Close but not touching, the core's light warmed slightly between them, responding to proximity. You came here as a technician, she said softly, but loud enough for the chamber to hear. You did not seek power. Daniel nodded slowly. I still do not. And yet, she continued, turning to face the council fully, you have shown adaptability beyond our own. You have guided the Guardian through trial. You have proven that evolution is not bound by blood. The elders stepped forward again, anger clear now. You would kneel to him, he accused. The chamber fell silent instantly, the word kneel echoing like a challenge. The queen's eyes flashed, not with rage, but with clarity. I do not kneel, she said firmly. I choose. She reached out then, placing her hand gently over Daniel's. The core reacted immediately, light surging in a controlled spiral around them. Not violent, not chaotic, but harmonious. Gasps filled the room as energy patterns shifted above the Guardian, merging two distinct signatures into a unified resonance. By sovereign decree, the Queen declared, her voice carrying absolute authority. Daniel Mercer stands not as subject, not as ruler above me, but as chosen partner in governance of Xyrine. The word struck the chamber like thunder, Chosen partner meant more than political alliance. It meant shared sovereignty, shared destiny. The architect hologram observed silently, then spoke. Governance realignment detected. Evolutionary compatibility increased. The elder staggered back slightly, realization dawning that the queen had not surrendered power. She had transformed it. Daniel looked at her in disbelief. "You do not have to do this," he whispered quietly. "I do," she replied, just as softly, "because survival without change is only delayed extinction." Outside the chamber, news of the declaration spread rapidly through the planetary networks. Reactions were divided. Some celebrated the victory against the architects. Others feared cultural collapse. Small groups within the military began murmuring about rebellion, unwilling to accept a human at the heart of their empire. The core pulsed once more, stronger now, stabilizing under dual alignment. High above, the architect vessel slowly retracted its expanded structures, its massive form shifting back into dormant configuration. Judgment deferred, the hologram announced, continued observation scheduled. The image faded, leaving only the steady glow of the Guardian behind. But peace did not settle in the palace. Tension coiled tightly beneath the surface. Tradition had been challenged, authority redefined, and not every faction would accept it quietly. As distant alarms suddenly flared again from the lower districts, signaling internal unrest rather than external threat, Daniel realized something important. The trial from the architects was over, but the true test of leadership had just begun. The rebellion did not begin with shouting. It began with silence in the lower military districts. Encrypted channels went dark, patrol fleets shifted formation without authorization, and entire battalions stopped responding to palace command. Inside the royal chamber, the core pulsed steadily, but the tension in the air sharpened like a blade being drawn slowly from its sheath. Daniel felt the disturbance before the reports arrived. The Guardian's network carried emotional patterns now, and fear mixed with anger was spreading across specific sectors, not random, organized. "They are mobilizing," one of the loyal tacticians confirmed, his voice tight. Several commanders reject the sovereign realignment. The queen did not show shock, only acceptance, as if she had expected this. "They believe I have surrendered our future," she said calmly. Daniel looked at the tactical projection above the core, rebel ships rising from hidden hangars, ground forces fortifying key power hubs. "They think I am the weakness," he said quietly. "They think you are change," the queen corrected. The palace trembled slightly as the first energy blast struck the outer defense ring. Not a full assault, but a declaration. The rebels were forcing confrontation before loyalty could stabilize. Daniel stepped closer to the core, its light reacting to the rising threat. He felt the pull of deeper synchronization again, stronger than before, almost urging him forward. "You cannot face them alone," one guard warned the queen. "I will not," she replied, turning her gaze to Daniel. For a brief moment, they simply looked at each other. No politics, no titles, only understanding. This was no longer about proving humanity to the architects. It was about proving unity to their own people. "Full synchronization," Daniel said softly, knowing the risk. The queen nodded once, firm and certain. Together, they placed their hands on the core at the same time. And this time the reaction was not violent or unstable. It was controlled power, a surge of light expanding outward in concentric waves across the palace, then beyond, into the atmosphere itself. Daniel felt his awareness stretch further than before. Not losing himself, but expanding. He could sense rebel fleet coordinates, defensive weak points, emotional spikes in command centers. The Guardian was no longer just amplifying him. It was integrating both their strengths, human adaptability and alien precision, merging into a unified command presence. Outside, rebel ships prepared a second strike, their weapons charging, confident that palace shields would fall quickly. Instead, the sky shifted. Planetary defense grids did not react in rigid formation like before. They flowed, redirecting energy dynamically, turning incoming blasts into redirected pulses that disabled engines without destroying ships. They are not destroying us. A rebel commander transmitted in disbelief. They are disarming. Daniel focused deeper, identifying the emotional core of the rebellion. Fear of replacement, fear of irrelevance, fear that tradition had no place in the new order. Open broadcast, he said to the Queen. She understood instantly and authorized planetary transmission. Their combined presence projected across every active channel, not as intimidation, but as clarity. The people of Zyra. 9 saw their queen standing beside the human, both illuminated by the steady glow of the Guardian. You fear loss. The queen's voice carried across cities and fleets alike, calm but powerful. But evolution does not erase identity. It strengthens it. Daniel's voice followed, steady and honest. I did not come here to rule you. I came to fix something, and what I found was not a broken machine. It was a system afraid to grow. Across the rebel fleet, hesitation spread, weapons lowered slightly, formation lines faltered. Then one extremist faction fired anyway, a concentrated blast aimed directly at the palace, determined to force collapse. Daniel reacted instantly. Drawing deeper into the Guardian than ever before, he felt the structure of the energy beam, its frequency, its weakness. Instead of blocking it fully, he split it, redirecting half into upper atmosphere where it dissipated harmlessly, and channeling the rest into a targeted pulse that disabled only the attacking ship's command core. The rebel vessel went dark, but did not explode, its crew alive, systems neutralized. Silence followed across all channels. Power without mercy is tyranny, Daniel said quietly through the broadcast, but mercy without strength invites chaos. We choose balance. The remaining rebel commanders began powering down voluntarily. One by one, the realization settling in that resistance was no longer about survival. It was about pride, and pride could not compete with a united Guardian. High above the planet, the architect vessel, still observing, adjusted its orbit slightly, recording the internal resolution. Conflict adaptation successful. A distant signal transmitted from it. Unseen by most, leadership convergence stable. Inside the palace, the light around Daniel and the Queen slowly dimmed back to normal levels. The full synchronization easing without breaking the bond. Daniel staggered slightly as awareness returned to normal scale. The Queen steadied him without hesitation, her hand firm at his side. It is done, she said softly, though her voice carried satisfaction rather than exhaustion. Across Zyra, 9, rebel forces surrendered command codes. Cities restored full operational stability, and the Guardian's pulse settled into a new rhythm. No longer solely alien, no longer solely human, but something shared. Daniel looked around the chamber that had once felt like a prison and now felt like the center of a future being written in real time. He had not arrived as a hero. He had not sought destiny. He had simply responded when something needed fixing. The Queen turned to him, her expression no longer distant or guarded, but certain. You were not chosen by me, she said quietly. You were chosen by possibility. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. That sounds heavier than fixing wiring. She almost smiled in return, a rare softness in her features. Evolution always is. Outside, the skies of Zyra, 9 cleared slowly, purple storms fading into calm, silver light, fleets returning to protective orbit rather than battle formation. The architect vessel began drifting away from the system. Not defeated, not hostile, simply satisfied for now. Daniel had come to repair a device he did not understand. He left the chamber not as a technician, not as a conqueror, but as the man who proved that strength is not about never kneeling. It is about choosing when to stand together. And on a world that once feared change, a human had become the bridge between survival and something greater. The man who was not important had become the man who was chosen.